And shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.
Hello and welcome to Engage for Success Radio and show, would you believe it, number 588 in our weekly series. That is some number. Engage for Success is the not-for-profit movement and the UK's leading voice on the topic of employee engagement. We're out there raising awareness and running events for our area networks right across the country. And our topic and sector-specific thought and action groups are developing research, publishing case studies, and highlighting all the best practice that's going on out there. Now, to find out more, please visit engageforsuccess.org. And while you're there, why not sign up for our weekly newsletter so you never miss out on any of our free excellent resources, events, and updates. And I'm Andy Gorham, your host for today's show and the founder of BizJuicer, the employee engagement and culture change consultancy that helps growing organizations become stickier from the inside by helping them attract, keep, and develop great people. And today we're delving into the frankly fascinating topic of neuroinclusivity in the workplace. Now, as awareness of neurodiversity grows, organizations are recognizing the importance of creating environments where neurodivergent individuals can thrive. But it can also be a tricky old topic for many organizations to navigate too. So it's great for us today to have with me Chris Hood, who's a partner at Neurobridge. And Chris is a absolute dedicate of crafting neuro-inclusive cultures and elevating businesses through neurodiversity support. Now, personally, I've got two kids with neurodiversity, one still studying and one in the workplace. And I'm absolutely convinced there's a lot of undiagnosed stuff going on with me as well. So personally, I'm really interested to hear what Chris has got to say today and probably share his own personal journey as well and how that fuels his passion for work. So Chris, welcome to the show, my friend. Great to have you here.
Thanks very much for having me, Andy. It's lovely to meet you.
Really nice to meet you, my friend. I genuinely am looking forward to this conversation. I have lots of questions, lots of brain fog associated with all this sort of stuff. And I'm really, really pleased you're here. Before we get into the topic and understand why you're so passionate about this stuff, just give us a little bit of background to you and Neurobridge, would you?
Yeah. So as you said, my name's Chris Hood. I'm partner at Neurobridge. I've got a very multifaceted role at Neurobridge, which is very fitting as I am an ADHD guy. So my days are made up of coaching, speaking, educating. I'm also involved in marketing, business development, proposition development. So there's lots of different fingers and pies to keep me busy and keep my brain occupied. And neurodiversity, we're an expert neurodiversity support company. We partner with organizations to help them implement the correct infrastructure for actually supporting neurodiversity in the workplace. And I won't give too much away now because I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit later as well. But we essentially work with these organizations to help them get the right foundations in place so that every individual there, whether neurodivergent or neurotypical, whether a team member or a manager, they've got the tools they need to succeed as individuals and as part of that team effort as well.
I think it's brilliant. I think, we've talked about diversity for a long time, but that tended to come with a kind of gender label attached to it. Now there's a big diversity in diversity, including the neuro stuff. So yeah, I think it's going to be great to have a chat about that today. I would like, if I may, my friend, to get personal right from the very, very start. I'm interested to hear about your journey and particularly how that has, I guess, inspired this force where you now champion neuro inclusivity. So tell me, where does that passion come from?
So it was really all born from my own struggles with my mental health. So while I was at university studying to be a physiotherapist, I found myself increasingly overwhelmed by the studying, the knowledge acquisition, the placements, the exams, the essays, as well as working and managing bills and rent and all of these things that were new to me as a 19-year-old lad. And I found myself really struggling with what I thought was anxiety and depression at the time. I did manage to get through university and I got a good job and I got myself into the adult world, but the mental health issues and the burnout didn't go away. And after a lot of digging and soul searching, I found out that I am actually combined ADHD, and I received a diagnosis in May 2022. So while I was dealing with the mental health issues, while I was kind of working my way towards that diagnosis, I set up a social media platform called Happiness in Movement. And that was essentially a place just to raise awareness of mental health, the fact that it's something we're all navigating, we can all struggle with. And once I received my diagnosis, I started posting about this as well. And that's how I connected with Josh Goodison, our CEO. And I joined Neurobridge at the beginning of January 2024. So this was all really born from a lot of personal pain and struggle and loneliness that I'd been navigating, and not wanting other people to be in that same position. You know, there's lots of people that are being diagnosed later in life, and we've spent a long time feeling wrong in who we are. And I now realize that I am not wrong in who I am. I do think and feel about things in a different way, but it is just a different way. It doesn't mean that I'm defective or disordered. I've just got to find different ways of doing things and moving through the world. And I want to help inspire other people to do the same. And once I heard Josh's own late diagnosed story as well, and it very much mirrored mine, similar struggles and issues that he'd faced, it just seemed like a match made in heaven. So yeah, bit his hand off and joined the team, and yeah, we're flying it.
Brilliant. I love it. I mean, you are, relatively speaking, compared to myself, a young chap, but you do hear a lot of this about late diagnosis today. For you personally, do you mind sharing, what did it feel like when you got that diagnosis? What was the initial impact? And actually, what's the longer term impact of that been?
The initial impact, which was fairly short lived, was a lot of relief and almost a feeling of elation. You know, it was very relieving and validating to know that I'm not just this bundle of character flaws and personal failings. I'm a guy who has been facing immense challenges without any of the right kind of tools or support. So it was very validating in that sense, but something I wasn't prepared for was the grieving period that came afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, realizing that I'd spent 27 years feeling scared, confused, and alone, and just battling to keep up appearances and meet expectations and try to keep people around me happy, while feeling increasingly unhappy and isolated in myself. And to know that there was 27 years that didn't necessarily need to be that way. There was a lot to try come to terms with in terms of where I'd needed more support and not had it, where I deserved a lot more support and empathy. There were things that I realized I'd really been lacking my whole life from a lot of people around me. And it was very difficult to come to terms with that. But I'm always reminded of the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's almost like you burn yourself down to a crisp getting to that point, and then you realize, okay, I might feel like I'm at rock bottom, but at least I can stand up now. So which direction do I want to start walking in, and who am I going to meet along the way? And it does definitely have the ability to turn your life around if you're willing to accept that things do need to change. And that's not just about the way you handle yourself, it's about the people you're around as well. You've got to find people that care about helping you be the best version of yourself, not just in the way you perform, but in the way that you feel, the way you can show up in the world, the way you can contribute and interact with people. And it does have the potential to save your life. It definitely saved mine. I don't know where I'd have ended up if I hadn't gone down this path and got that answer. So it's life-changing.
I mean, that is a, I don't know if it's the right word, but a wonderful story. And, you know, having not met you for very long, you have an incredible positive vibe about you. So to come through something like this and to use it in the positive way you are is absolutely fantastic to see. And I'd like to understand more if that's okay. So we'll crack on going through. I don't know if it's worth getting everybody on the same page, Chris, because I do think that sometimes the whole neurodiversity thing is thrown around willy-nilly and people aren't talking about the same sort of things. So have you got like a helpful definition for it? And I guess, what is the sort of scale of it? How prevalent is it in today's workforce, do you think? Or no?
And the world at large. Yes. So when we say neurodiversity, that's a term that's referring to the wide and very natural variation in cognitive operating systems that's present throughout our population.
Hmm.
No two minds are exactly alike. And whether you are neurodivergent or neurotypical, you belong to that community. We are a neurodiverse species by nature. But when we're speaking about neurodivergence, that is people whose neurocognitive functioning significantly differs to the majority of people, meaning they've got significantly different strengths, challenges, support needs. And latest estimates state that that's around 20% of the population. So 1 in 5 people in the workplace are navigating an invisible disability or difference. And when we're talking about the scale of these things, one thing I like that you mentioned earlier was the diversity within diversity. And neurodiversity doesn't discriminate. This isn't something that cares whether you're male, female, younger, older. This is something that affects people of all races, all genders, and it is lifelong in most cases. So it's something that, while it does fall within that DEI bracket, it really is about all of us. And when workplaces do start understanding how to identify, address, and meet those individual needs based on how a person's brain works, what their preferences and needs are, then that's when people really start to shine, and their challenges get minimized, and the strengths can start to come out, and their uniqueness really starts to be highlighted in the workplace, and everyone benefits from that.
100%. And for me, it always comes back to the three, I think, basic rights of anybody at work: to be seen, heard, and valued. And I think in this case, to be properly seen,
Yeah.
and to be properly heard, and then to understand what my unique gifts are.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is fascinating about this. But we're hearing a lot more about neurodiversity, aren't we? I mean, it's becoming almost as commonplace as conversation as just as you've mentioned mental health before. You know, not many years ago that was a taboo subject in itself. But why do you think it is that we are talking about it a lot more? Is it a self-fulfilling thing that there's more diagnosis, therefore there's more people affected? What's going on from your perspective? You're far closer to it than I am.
So this isn't something that's becoming more prevalent. We're just getting much better at identifying it.
Yeah.
And we're developing our awareness and understanding of what neurodivergence really means and how this can affect a person in their daily life and what they need. You know, the earliest telescopes compared to the stuff we're looking through now, you saw next to nothing. And that's what we're really starting to see now, is that these things have been thoroughly researched and validated for decades. And we're now seeing science and society starting to catch up, where that conversation is becoming more normalized. That's something that's definitely been assisted by the internet and social media, because people now have readily available information about things that previously weren't mentioned. And we're also able to share those lived experiences with people all over the world and actually recognize that this doesn't look like what we're led to believe. You know, when we learn about autism, people think that instantly means it's a mute rocking child, but I'm autistic. That's something that I realized after my ADHD diagnosis, and I'm incredibly verbal and social as long as I'm with people that bring that out in me.
Yeah.
ADHD, it's not always a little kid bouncing around a classroom. It's often a really overwhelmed woman in the office that's struggling with perfectionism and people pleasing. And because we're recognizing the breadth of how these things can actually manifest and we're able to talk about them, people that are referred to as the lost generations that didn't have access to this stuff, these are the people that are late teens, 20s and beyond, up to 50s, 60s. I've even spoken to people in their 70s that were receiving a diagnosis. This is something that has always been there. We're just getting much better at noticing it, and it's becoming less stigmatized. It's no different to the journey of left-handedness, you know. That 10 to 12% was always there, but they used to tie his hands behind his backs when we were in school because they thought it was evil or witchcraft or something like that. So we're getting to a point where we're recognizing differences aren't a threat, they're not a problem. It just means people have got different preferences and support needs, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I think that's really interesting because now we are, I guess, more aware. That doesn't mean we're better at handling things by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And I think particularly at work, I mean, lots of businesses, organizations, even industries are all running at different paces on this sort of stuff. But I think this can bring challenges for everybody. It can bring challenges for the individuals. It can bring challenges for the teams who are working with that alongside that individual, and for employers to do the right thing and understand and act appropriately. What are some of
Mm.
the challenges that you see across that whole smorgasbord there of
Yeah.
everybody dealing with this, not just the person who is carrying the diagnosis?
Yeah. Well, I suppose if we start with the individual and work up, neurodivergent individuals are more at risk of encountering mental health issues, where we're at a much higher risk of things like anxiety, depression, stress, burnout. And when we're not being accommodated and supported in the right way, it's an uphill battle the whole time. And we are animals just like anyone else. We don't have an infinite capacity, and that does lead to people becoming burnt out. It turns into sick leave, repeated absences, much more time away from work, and that really chips away at a person's self-esteem, because they start to blame themselves, and they start to develop a very negative self-perception that's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're in school and we're being told that we're lazy because we're struggling to focus, and then we end up thinking that all those teachers were true when we're in the workplace, because we're still struggling to focus because we just don't have the tools that we need.
Mm.
But from a wider perspective, when we see how that starts to interact in a team environment, it means that the way we communicate and collaborate with each other can become affected, and that can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts, and these things all really harm overall productivity and performance. As you expand from there, that can turn into massive legal risks. I think it's around 1 in 10 UK companies are either going through or have been through a tribunal relating to neurodiversity. So there's
Really? Gosh.
there's there's major ramifications for employers that are struggling to get this right. And I say that because I don't believe any companies are acting maliciously by not supporting these things. It's just that they don't have the infrastructure or the resources or the knowledge to know what they need to do. And that keeps snowballing. It means that we're developing a more negative self-image. It means that we're struggling to recruit the right people. We're struggling to keep those people happy and retain them. And we all know the impact that has on revenue and the way that we're perceived in that public eye. So it really does affect everything from the bottom line right up to that C-suite and executive leadership.
I'm sure, and this probably now starts to touch on some of the work that you're doing with Neurobridge.
Mhm.
So if those are a lot of the challenges, and that statistic around legal challenge, that's quite shocking. But
Mm.
um, from your experience and from what you see in the marketplace, what sort of things are organizations successfully doing to try and address some of these challenges that you've mentioned? What are they up to? What are they doing differently to other people?
So I think people that are just starting that journey and people that are starting to walk that road to being neuro inclusive, it does all start with awareness, because most people may not have direct contact with these things. They might not explicitly know someone that lives with some form of neurodivergence. So that awareness building is a really key factor. Similar to the mental health conversation, that's become a very normalized thing when we talk about workplace well-being, and it was because we started talking about it. So this is looking like guest speakers or attending webinars, or it's providing resources that are talking about the information people need to understand. And this is a really crucial step to take, because it is starting to shift away from this reactive case by case support that we're giving employees. But this does lead to a very difficult place, because only 25% of neurodivergent employees will actually openly disclose to their employer as things stand. So 3 in 4 are too afraid of negative consequences to actually say anything.
I was going to
So
say, is that for fear of some sort of retribution
yeah, yeah,
or misplaced viewpoint about them, or
exactly.
those
Yeah.
sorts of things? Yeah.
Yeah, so we run a neurodiversity inclusion survey with a lot of the people that we're working with, and on average, out of that 75%, 63 of them chose not to disclose because they were worried about judgment,
Yeah.
bias, discrimination, limited progression opportunities, or even risks to their job security.
Mm.
So these are very real concerns that people have got, and it does highlight that while awareness is an important step to take and starting to get the conversations going, the environment is still being perceived as psychologically unsafe by those you're raising awareness for. So initiatives like Neurodiversity Celebration Week, it's amazing for getting the conversation going. And we saw some really high engagement from a lot of big companies this year. But it isn't enough to address the needs of those people that for 51 weeks a year, they're feeling like a burden. They're feeling unsupported, they're feeling isolated, and they're struggling in silence.
Mm. Is this you mentioned awareness? I mean, that must be a continuing thing because
Mm,
organizations, teams are evolving constantly. But it also sounds like there's something around attitude that's really required. Maybe process, even policies. Is it a mix of all these things that really, from a strategic perspective, organizations need to be focusing on? It's not that silver bullet one fix. Oh yeah, we are a neurodiverse employer. Get on with it. I mean, it's
absolutely.
deeper than that, right?
It is, and this is something that does need a lot of restructuring and rebuilding from the ground up. Because if you've got shaky foundations, the house isn't going to last. So if you're lacking those policies, if you've not got cemented neuro-inclusive internal processes, whether that's relating to recruitment and hiring, or it's your learning and development, or it's your team working and your communication metrics, if these things aren't addressed and rebuilt in a way that allows every type of mind to contribute, then the awareness days, the initiatives, these guest speakers, these things do fall short. Because we've all had a busy day at work before when we've gone and joined a webinar. And 5 minutes once we've left the webinar, we're right back into us work because there's so much else that we need to be doing. So unless these things are really embedded into the foundations of a business, and it's made open from the offset that this is a culture where all minds belong and you will all be embraced, then any sort of one-off initiatives, as you say, it's not something that's going to have a lasting, meaningful impact. We need to move from that place of reactivity, where you're only addressing 1 in 4, to a place of proactivity, where everybody, regardless of their disclosure status or what it is that they're diagnosed with, they're able to access the support that they need. And you're openly stating that we are a neuro-inclusive environment and we want to prioritize your psychological safety. And that's really what the work is that we do. We help to provide that infrastructure through our neurodiversity inclusion support system. We help to address all areas of a business so that they've got readily available access to tools, guides, resources, and additional support, so that if a person is feeling psychologically unsafe, or if a person is unsure about what types of adjustments they need, they can use our resources without ever having to disclose to anyone, and they can start that self-learning discovery journey to get to a point where they do feel confident about what their needs are and they do know where they need to go for the support. Because oftentimes people don't know what's available or who to ask for it. So we need to simplify that and remove as many barriers as possible. And that need to disclose is an enormous barrier. When it's putting off 75% of people, that's something that needs addressing. Why are so many people afraid, and what can we do to make sure that fear is completely mitigated?
And I mean, this is going to make me sound like a real old what's it who says things and with unintended consequences. But I suspect there's plenty of businesses where the disclosure thing's an issue for them too, because either they would like to know so they can support, but don't feel that they should ask or can't ask because of this disclosure preference of individuals. That itself is a tricky old line to kind of cross. Sometimes you want to do the right thing, but you do the wrong thing by almost pressurizing someone to come forward. Are you seeing examples of that, best intentions going wrong as well?
Absolutely, because there's a scenario where you ask someone this and they're dead certain that absolutely isn't the case, and you cause a whole load of offence going about it. And
Yeah.
again, it's not been done in a malicious way, but there is these major risks when we're going into those conversations. And a lot of the resources we provide, it's about how to actually navigate those conversations in an empowering but inclusive and empathetic way. And this isn't about sussing out someone's diagnosis. It's not trying to figure out what quote unquote label they're
No.
living with. It's about finding out what their challenges are, why it's impacting them, what types of things around them, whether it's their environment, their role, their team, or their responsibilities. What is it that's contributing to this? And how can we go about adapting that so that you as an individual are having your needs met, that barrier is reduced as much as possible, and then that there's support available and we're here to readily provide that. So I feel like we're working towards getting to a point where disclosure status and the figures around that aren't going to be as important a thing, because is the goal really to get 100% of people disclosing, or is it to get 100% of people feeling safe enough in their team environment and feeling confident enough about what they need, and 100% of managers feeling confident enough to address and support those individual challenges? I think that's a much better end goal.
I would agree with you 100%, my friend. I think our quest here, if you like, for more meaningful work or fulfilling work or safe environments is absolutely about that. Comes back to the seen, heard, valued piece for the individual, regardless of their circumstances. But I do think you raise, or you talk about an interesting group of people in line managers there,
Mm-hmm.
because for all sorts of reasons in business, bless them, these are the guys that are oscillating between the guys on the floor and the guys above.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in the specific support or that you give them to try and take some practical steps in dealing with these situations to try and create, I guess, this more neuro-inclusive culture that we've started to talk about today. So when you're talking with line managers or trying to support them, what sort of things are you encouraging them to do or supporting them through?
I suppose, on a broader sense, a couple of principles that we'd always want to have front of mind is that we need to be avoiding assumptions.
Yeah.
We could look and we could say, right, Tom here has disclosed that he's ADHD. That doesn't mean that you instantly know what all of this person's experiences and challenges are. It doesn't mean that you understand exactly where his areas of difficulty in the workplace are or why they're a difficulty for him. So we may look at someone that doesn't make as much eye contact when they're speaking, and we could interpret that as a lack of interest in the conversation, or it's a lack of care in the relationship. But really, it's just a difference in the way that a person communicates. And we have a lot of probably unknown cognitive biases about the people around us, and we do make assumptions very quickly, especially about things we don't fully understand. So avoiding assumptions is key. If you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person,
Yeah.
because the breadth of experiences is huge, and no two people's challenges are going to be exactly the same. So making sure that we're just understanding how this person is as an individual and what it is that we can do to provide that support for them. And from a wider sense, a lot of the support we provide for managers in the form of e-learning or guides and resources, it's all tailored around how they can utilize their existing skills, but through this neurodiverse lens now, how we can actually expand what it is that you know how to do well, but just understanding how to apply these things in a more neuro-inclusive way, so that you're helping people be their best and you're being the best for them.
I love the use of the lens metaphor, because I think this is what's really coming through in a lot of the people landscape is a series of lenses, whether it be color, behavior, preference, or even some of the generational stuff or the neurodiversity. All we're doing is trying to get a closer look at the individual and a better understanding of the individual. Before we sort of begin to wrap up, there clearly is some great merit and benefit to the work that you guys are doing. What is the impact if businesses really look at this stuff properly and get it right? What sort of benefits have you seen in the work that you've done for organizations?
You're looking at improved overall health and well-being, improved satisfaction in their job. That leads to better retention, improved performance, productivity, engagement. These things all lead to better decision making, being more innovative and agile in your market. It turns into better business outcomes. It turns into increased revenue. These are all things that are going to speak to that top level. This is about helping people to be at their best, so that as a collective they can be at their best and you can be at your best. One of our clients said that just from receiving some coaching, the investment that they'd had returned just from having this person stay in their role, that spoke for itself. Just from being able to keep a really high performing individual happy in their role. This is how we improve things overall for a business. I'm very non-corporate, as you might have understood from the way that I talk, but it does come down to that brass tacks sometimes. You get more for your money. You get the best out of people, and that helps the business grow in the ways that you want it to.
100%. That retention line is such a huge cost for lots of businesses. And if you're feeling safe, comfortable, able to turn up and be your best, and that you're understood and valued, well, people are going to stick around longer.
That's it.
Absolutely right. Chris, there is so much more I would want to ask you, hopefully another time I'll get another chance to speak to you. But thanks so
Absolutely.
much for sharing your insight and experience with us today. If people want to connect with you, want to find out a bit more about NeuroBridge, where should they head for?
I'd encourage you to head to neurobridge.co.uk. That's our main site where you can learn more about the work that it is that we're doing. That's how you can get in touch with us directly. And same if you just search NeuroBridge on LinkedIn, there's a lot of really useful content and insights going out on there on a regular basis. So they'd be the best places to get in touch with us.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on. Everybody, that's about all we've got time for today. Don't forget to visit engageforsuccess.org to check out the show notes and explore the free employee engagement resources. And don't forget, you can also download or stream any of the previous episodes completely at your leisure. We'll be back at the same time next week. I'm Andy Gorham, and thanks for listening to Engage for Success Radio.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.